welcome everyone, or good morning or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Nikki McInteer, and we're here to talk about Acing Admissions, the very helpful book that my panelists have authored, and their second edition of the book. So hopefully this will be a good place to talk about the book and get some good advice for the process of applying to colleges in the US. And yeah, hopefully we'll have a good discussion. We will kind of have a moderated panel for the first 30 minutes, and then we would like to take your questions for the last 30 minutes or so of the presentation. So please make sure to write some questions in the Q&A if those come up, and we will address those at the end of the session, or in the middle, I guess, more. My name is Nikki McInteer. I work at Wake Forest. I'm an Associate Dean of Admissions there. I also went to Wake Forest, like one of my panelists today. And I work pretty much exclusively with international students. So my job is to understand curricula from around the world and evaluate those applications and work with families to learn more about Wake Forest. So, and Wake Forest is in North Carolina, where I'm coming from today, and it's a little rainy, but it's a city of about 250,000 people in North Carolina.
Great.
And Kim, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'll introduce myself. My name's Kim Dixit, and I am the CEO and co-founder of the Red Pen, which is an independent education consulting company based in Mumbai, India. And yeah, I have a PhD from Duke University in cultural anthropology and a bachelor's degree from UC Santa Barbara, also in anthropology. So I've always been interested in different cultures and people and things like that. Stories, which is where the whole, and my interest in, helping students craft their story comes from. I have been doing this work now for almost a decade, and we help students, as you can see over here on the right side of the screen, with all levels of education, whether early advising, undergraduate, postgraduate, MBA, or boarding school. So we are, a full service consultancy for all educational decisions. And I have taught at several US colleges and universities, including Duke University, where I got my PhD, and also Stanford as a postdoctoral teaching fellow. So again, have a lot of experience with, what campus life is like, what students are, what's expected of students, and things like that, that I bring to the process of advising students in our practice. So I will hand it over now to Kavita. Can you?
Yes, I can, sorry. Hi everyone, I'm Kavita Mehta. I am the founder of Camus Technology Ventures. Our flagship program or product is www.lore.online, which helps you make better education decisions. I have an MBA from the Wharton School, as you can see on the screen, and I also went to Wake Forest University like Nikki. I majored in business there. So as Kim has 2 degrees in anthropology, I have 2 in business. And I have an extensive corporate background across finance and digital media in New York, Silicon Valley, and Singapore. And I moved to India in 2009 and have been working in education and education technology ever since.
Great, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and Nikki, you can go ahead and start. We can start, sort of with the questions, and then we'll come back to the presentation later to let people know how and where to buy the book.
So Kavita, I'll first ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
It's a great question. I felt like a lot of the advice that Kim and I were giving in the work that we were doing as consultants was basic and maybe, just an overview. And I felt that more people, we could impact more people by applicant and parent base. And it's a great sort of primer type of document or resource to get people started on this process. So it's just to impact more people.
And your book focuses so much on the US and that process, and it is such a particular process compared to the rest of the world, with different tests and things like that and different expectations. So Kim, why is the US a good choice for many of your students that you work with, and what's different about the US, and And why would a student, or why should a student choose the US over the many opportunities they might have to study abroad?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Nikki, because I think, you know, sometimes when students hear about the application process, they immediately think, oh, I don't want to apply to the US, it's too complicated. You know, I don't know which of those thousands of colleges I want to apply to, and it seems quite daunting. And so again, part of why the book is, you know, the intention behind the book is because we felt that, you know, the US is one of the best places in the world for higher education, that, you know, we wanted to help demystify and simplify the process. But and the reason why I would encourage many students to look at the US, not all, but and the reason why, you know, it's right for many students is because of the flexibility and the breadth, and also just the kind of liberal philosophy of education that all US universities embrace, and which sort of supports students in definitely specializing and learning about a particular major, let's say, in the final 2 years, but in the first 2 years, really getting a broad sense of you know, of an intellectual landscape that they need to be able to grasp, and also that they you know, are building skills in research, reasoning, and all those skills that students need that aren't necessarily you know, major specific, that you need that to do whatever you end up doing in life, in the world. So, I mean, I do think that, you know, many students at the age of 17 don't know what they want to study, and the US system really accommodates that. They really, you know, it's really fine if you're undecided or you're decided, but you change your mind. So the US really kind of allows students to explore a lot more and gives them a lot of kind of time and opportunity to kind of, I guess, decide on their interests a bit later, which is, I think, a more appropriate time.
I completely agree, and I think that's such a benefit of studying in the US, but that could also be really intimidating for students to have that much openness, because some students, you know, want kind of a clearer path or a clearer understanding of their studies. And so for a university, it becomes a lot about this word fit with a student, and because so many universities offer so many different programs and pathways to different programs. And so fit is something you really emphasize in the book, and you talk a lot about, and everyone always puts it in quotes, right? In quotes, fit. So what does this word mean, and how can students wrap their brains around it to help guide their decision making in this process? And maybe Kavita, I'll throw it back to you, but I think this is a really good question, so maybe Kim, I'll ask you for some follow-up.
Yeah, so fit is critical, and that's how you make decisions or decide where you want to apply in the US. So just given the size of the United States, the number of universities that available to students is enormous compared to other countries, and countries that are larger like India. And so the way to really narrow down is to understand who you are as a person and what's important, where you excel, and find those characteristics in the colleges to which you apply. So there's ways to look at fit when it comes to the size of the university, for example, if it's large or small, the focus of the university, the location of it, is it on the East Coast or West Coast? Is it a campus like Wake Forest that has gates and it's, you know, really contained, or is it a college town? And all of those things offer different benefits and different challenges. And if you understand who you are as a person and what environments in which you thrive, fit will help you get the most of the university experience. Colleges there's so much going on at every college, no matter how small it is or how big it is. And so a lot of times you need to think about what is the best way for you to access the resources at the particular university. So I know in the work that Kim and I have done, and if you look through the book, we often ask questions that are really more probing about a person's personality and temperament and preferences, not just their academic interests or career interests, because all of those things go into the concept of fit. So for example, I picked Wake Forest University many years ago because so much of it came from fit. I came to visit and I felt welcomed on campus. I met with lots of professors. The campus was beautiful. It was expansive, but not too big. It had it had a good range of extracurricular activities, but I didn't feel overwhelmed. It was slightly bigger than my high school, but not as big as the university I went to for my master's degree. So in hindsight, those are the things that allowed me to thrive when I was at Wake Forest. And now my own daughter is going through this process, and those are the kind of things that we're looking at, is sort of what is her personality and where will she thrive.
And Kim, do you have any additional kind of talk or thoughts about the idea of fit, or also how to kind of find your best fit?
Yeah.
At school.
Sorry, I seem to be having some internet trouble, but I guess I'll just keep talking. If there's any issue, just let me know. But I did hear your question. I think, I think one thing that, and I just had a talk with a student yesterday about this, and he was just like tied up in knots about finding this perfect fit. And I was like, there's also something to not overthinking it. You can also just pick some and move on, because you have to eventually do that, and to be honest, I mean, we are not going to recommend colleges to him that any of which are like, a terrible fit or a real stretch or anything. So they're all going to be pretty much fine. And I think a lot of times students get very stressed about this concept that, oh my God, I have to find the right fit. It has to be perfect. And, and another student who I spoke to just the other day, she is the kind of student who is, I think she's going to be great wherever she goes, right? I mean, that's some people's personality. They just make the best of things. They will always find their people, and they will always, engage with their community, and they're going to be happy. So, the issue of fit is very, very important, but I think how you get to it, it can be different for different people. And I think, for some people, all fit is weather. Or all fit is, geography. I want to be in California, or I want to be in Boston, or whatever. What's that, Kavita? Yeah,
East Coast, West Coast.
Whatever, yeah. Or public colleges, private colleges. I think there's a lot of choice. So if you just think, I can't think about the best college for, again, I have to specifically know what exact thing I want to study in, biology. Is it genetics? Is it, what is that little tiny thing I want to study, and where is it the best? That can kind of like really occupy too much of a 17-year-old's mind. And it's not that important. I mean, because you will find those things everywhere, and you will find, if not that thing, you'll find something else. But the point is just that, understanding, I think the things like, the mission of the college, or the the initiatives that are going on, or the things like that, where and I feel like with a lot of the students that I talk to, unfortunately, or for better or for worse, it is kind of a gut feeling I have. Like, I see the student, I see all the things they've done, I can see how they kind of have functioned till now, and I say, I know that this college is a place where you can do a lot of that. Or maybe this college is a place where you're going to get a lot of hand holding, and you need that. So those are the kinds of things that, you need to talk to people who have experience. I think that's a really important element of finding a good fit. So that's, I think, I'll just leave it at that for now. I think there's a question about how to find the right university, but we can kind of get a little deeper into that later.
Absolutely. Well, I think you both emphasized introspection, so learning yourself through the process and putting in the research. Kind of no easy way to be able to understand those resources better. So hope Kim will join us. We're going to talk about what's like the hallmark trait of a successful application. I think what is one thing that really shines, but we'll talk kind of in more detail the different pieces, because in the US it's a lot of it's a process that brings together a whole picture. But what is kind of one hallmark trait that makes a successful application?
So as you mentioned, the US process is holistic, so lots of different elements kind of go in. I think that Kim and I would both agree that, you know, what we call data is the most important thing. And when I say data, I don't mean just the test score. I mean the effort that you've put in your 4 years of high school. And have you challenged yourself? Have you grown? You know, have you increased? Your performance improve classroom. So anything that's academic, because in the end you're going into an academic environment and you need to be able to handle that and thrive in that. Of course, there's tests, you know, SAT, ACT. I don't really put as much emphasis on that, especially, you know,
Something's burned.
So many more colleges are going. But if you're just going through the motions of ticking boxes and doing that, it'll come across as flat. There will be no depth or dimension to it. So, you know, we can talk about extracurriculars and essays and all of that, but the overarching sort of theme is sincerity and passion for the things that you choose to do and talk about.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think it does come across really nicely when a student has made their decisions intentionally and thoughtfully, and also has thought about themselves. And I think a genuineness is hard to fake. And so I think that when you are sincere in this process, it becomes very apparent in the application. And you mentioned about writing and essays. And so Kim, is your internet okay? Are you good?
Yeah,
okay, good. So, you know, I'm sure you've mentored a lot of students with essays and how they write them. And so how do you think, what is the impact of an essay for a college application? And how should students approach that essay, and kind of, because it is its own genre, right? It's not kind of like a piece they're writing for an English class or for a history class. It is its own genre. So what is kind of how do you kind of help students start that process, and what makes a good essay?
Right. So it's really interesting that you asked this question. We could also do the poll, but I'll do it after I answer this question, if that's the thing that people are most worried about. But the issue is that, you know, what I find often is the students want to write about a particular event, like something that happened to them. Like, okay, I've spent this much of my time playing soccer, or I've spent this much of my time doing robotics, and I want to write about that. It's like, but what does that tell me about you as a person? And until something is telling me about a person, then it's not a good essay, right? If you're telling me about an activity, what you did, what you achieved, how many times you won, I don't know anything about you. And usually all of that information is elsewhere in the application. I can see all the awards you've won. I can see all the MUN trips you've gone on, and how many best delegates you are. But if you can find a story, and I'm not going to say, I wouldn't say find a story that that highlights the characteristics you want the admissions committee to know. I would say first decide, what do you want them to know? First decide, what is it that you want an admissions committee to know about you? I want you to know I'm kind. I want you to know I'm creative. I want you to know I'm, you know, funny, whatever it is. And then think, you know, how can I demonstrate that? What's the story? You know, maybe the story about robotics is not the right story. Maybe there's a story about, you know, a collection of dolls or stamps or something that reveals that in a much more kind of vivid and sincere way. So I think that, you know, it's easy for me to say this, but I think that that's really where I tell students to start is, you know, what do you want the admissions office to know about you? And you only have like 1 minute for them to get it. You know, you don't have a lot of time. So you have to be, you know, and there's an art there's an art to it. It's, you know, you have to be able to craft your story in a way that is quite powerful. But, you know, to make a great essay, and those are great essays, you know, if you can be clever and you can bring, you know, diverse ideas together, and all of that makes a great essay. But you don't have to do that. Maybe that's just not your thing. You're not good at that. That's fine. As long as what you want the admissions committee to know about you is communicated. But Nikki, maybe you even have more to say. You read a lot more essays than I do, but.
I think that, you know, there are no bad topics. I've Googled this before. What are bad essays? And there are no bad topics. I think that I've read great essays about torn ACLs, which everyone says don't write about a sport injury. But, you know, it just depends on how a student reflects on that and what the student shows in that essay. And so I think that your advice is spot on. And I think it's very good advice for students to think about that. We've had some questions, and this kind of goes into our next kind of questioning. And that's just, there is this particular vocabulary around admissions in the US. And so there's words like early decision, early action, and binding. And Kavita, can you just kind of explain like what these rounds mean and why universities would choose to kind of admit students in different rounds and things like that? I mean, just kind of explain this unique vocabulary and the timeline of it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little complicated and changing all the time, and especially this year, just given how unusual everything is, literally everything. So basically, you can apply in there's two general buckets. There's early and there's regular. And early is bifurcated further into early action and early decision. And the difference between the two of them is that early action is you're not committed to going to a school, but you can apply early and find out if you get in early. And early decision, it means that once you apply to that school and you were to get in, you are committed, you are contractually committed to go to that university. So a lot of times, you know, students know I definitely want to go to this university. I visited 3 times. My parents went there. I want to go. So they'll apply early decision. And most universities, they will fill 30 to 50% of their class in the early round. So that's one of the reasons to apply there early, because there are more seats available to fewer applicants at that point. Now, if you don't know 100% whether you want to go to a school, do not apply early decision. You can apply early action, and that means that you hear back earlier in the process. But most students, we would recommend apply regular decision, and those applications are due generally in January, and that means that you have you apply with, you know, a bigger pool of other applicants, and you get your decisions in March, and then you can make it a choice on where you want to apply. Oftentimes you apply in regular decision because of scholarship considerations and other things like that. So, you know, early, most people only apply to one school early, but you apply to the range of schools in the regular decision. It's person by person and situation by situation, but I had a family a few years ago that I had worked with, and they pulled me aside somewhere, and they it was at a talk, and they said, oh, well, we've applied early decision to Brown. I said, oh, how did you like it when you visited? And they're like, oh, we've never visited. And I said, oh my gosh, how can you apply early decision to a college you've never visited? Your child will have to go there and stay for 4 years. So that's something to keep in mind, is that early decision is binding.
Yeah, so it's so important to put out. I'm so glad you emphasized the 100% sure, because that is a big decision. And so I think sometimes students feel pressure to apply in that early round because there's some misconceptions about that, or it's easier, you know, but I think that it's for those students that are 100% ready to make their decision about that college. So I'm glad you emphasized that. I want to be mindful of our time because I want to be able to get to questions at the end. So I want to kind of talk about a big topic right now, and that is SAT. And so that is going to look very different this year, I think. And so, Kim, I'm excited to hear about how you're advising your students this year as opposed to other years, or are you making a decision we think it's going to kind of go back to normal? So what is kind of your talk about SATs these days?
Yeah, it's a moving target, that's for sure. I think, you know, what's very sort of tiring, I think, is that, you know, test dates are getting canceled one after the other, and that's frustrating. However, there's also, you know, the fact that, you know, so many colleges, I mean, like almost, I won't say almost every, but many colleges have said that they will evaluate applications without testing this year. So going test optional, as it's called. But then when those test optional declarations come out, sometimes if you read the fine print, it says, if you decide not to submit a test score, then you have to do something else, or, you have to then, you have to prove that you couldn't take the test, or you have to, your counselor has to. I mean, it's just like, is it test optional or is it not test optional? So it's just very, very stressful. And I think, just to put it out there, I think that is where Wake Forest has been a leader for years. For how many years have you guys been test optional?
We went test optional in 2008. So it's been a while.
Yeah. So for a long time, I think very absolutely test optional. Like, you don't look at an applicant without a test score and say, could they have afforded to take the test? I mean, it's just not right. So this is, this is where I think becomes very difficult for us as counselors to advise students, because they want to have the best chance to get admitted, to be admitted to their top choice college. And if they hear that, all their friends who are applying to their top choice colleges have SAT scores and are submitting them, then they might try. But I think, there's been a lot of, they will try, they'll go to a different state. I mean, I keep reading these stories about, kids going to different states, to flying to Dubai, going through 2 versions of quarantine just to take the SAT. I don't think anybody wants students to do that. That is not the goal. So I think as students are sort of—
Sure, we can go into another question, or wait, she's back. You froze there for a little bit, so yeah.
So did you hear much of what I said, or should I repeat it?
No, you were saying something about people moving to other states.
Oh yeah, I was just saying people, I said people flying to Dubai and going through quarantine twice to take the SAT, but I said that is not what anybody wants. Counselors, universities, nobody wants students to risk their health and just to take the SAT test, and that's why, or the ACT, and that is why most of the colleges have become test optional. So I really do sincerely think that for international students, there's a very good rationale for not testing. And I can't really speak about other countries because I don't know what's happening there, but if there's a place in the world where testing hasn't been disrupted, then yes, they may look a bit strange if you haven't submitted a test score. But for international students in India especially, it is absolutely almost impossible to have taken the test till now, since March. So I think that's a really long answer to say that if your test dates have been canceled and you're really stressed about what to do next, just don't test. I think it's going to be okay. And whether or not this continues is anybody's guess, but I hope it does.
And I think, Kavita used a very important word earlier, and that's the word holistic. So it never comes down to just one factor for a college admissions committee. It always is several factors that we consider when reading applicants. So it's like a puzzle piece, and the testing is just one piece of that. And we look at a lot of other things. So I think that that's an important word to make sure we understand.
Nikki, I just want to say something. Sorry. And I think you can definitely speak to this, as you guys are a highly selective university that is test optional for many years. And I think what families and students should not do, this is very important, why I want to say it, is should not assume that if a college is test optional, then it's easy to get into. Because then your grades almost have to be better than, you have nothing else to show, you just have your grades. So
the data.
Yeah, and so I think, that's a big mistake that a lot of people make. I just wanted to put that out there, that test optional does not mean less selective, easier to get into. It just means you don't have to take it.
Or if you're test optional, you might require a little bit more to get in. We have always asked a lot of essay questions, and for some students, that's not a fun thing to write. So I think that's absolutely true. It's definitely, we're looking at other things if we're not looking at the test. It's not like we just take it away. It's definitely balanced out by other factors in the application, for sure. The last question I want to ask before we kind of turn to student questions. So students, if you're thinking about some questions, you can go ahead and write those in the Q&A, and I will monitor those for the last half of our session. Kavita, I just wanted to ask, especially since you have experience with a lot of different boarding schools and all around the world, does an Indian applicant, are they at a disadvantage if they're coming from a local board or an Indian board over students who maybe have been enrolled in the IB curriculum or taking AP classes? How do colleges look at applicants from India who are not enrolled in those international curricula?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking it, because I think this is one that I get all the time, even casually at cocktail parties and what have you. Should I put my child in the international curriculum? And I said, it doesn't matter. What the beauty of the U.S. system is, because there's so many universities of different styles, types, etc., and because the U.S. education system is distributed at the state level, there is no national level curriculum there. So U.S. universities are already accustomed to and used to looking and understanding different curricula across states, counties, etc. So adding in another country or another set of curricula is not as burdensome, and most have actually already gone through that process. So the idea of an international curriculum is actually quite new, relatively speaking, and no one is at any disadvantage for having done the local curriculum. I myself have 3 daughters. One went through the local curriculum, 2 are doing an international curriculum, and it just, whatever works for your family financially and logistically makes the most sense. And I think a few years ago, Kim and I worked with, and I always like to bring this example up because it just shows that it doesn't matter. In 1 year, we had 2 students who gone into Harvard, 1 into MIT, and 1 into Stanford. And they were in India, they were HSC students, ISC students, and CBSE students, not a single international curriculum student in that batch. So it's fine, and universities are used to this. This is your job, right, Nikki, is to understand different education systems and understand, has the student done the best that they can in the system that was available to them. And that's, I think, one last point is that students can't really pick where they go to school and what their family can afford. They just have to be able to do the best with what's available and in the system and in the framework in which they find themselves.
Absolutely, yes. I think that's very good advice, and I think just knowing what you can control, I think, is good too. That's all you can do. So, all right. So we've gotten some good questions. If we want to kind of turn to the audience questions and see what's on their mind. And one question that has come up is about extracurriculars, which we haven't talked upon that. So we've touched upon different things about what makes an application. We've talked about the essays. We've talked about testing. But there's also things like letters of recommendation. There's your short answer questions, but also a list of extracurricular activities. And so, Kim, how important are extracurriculars for a college application, and what advice would you give to students to, engage themselves outside of the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to, can you hear me? I feel like everyone's frozen.
Sorry.
I hear you. Yeah, okay, great. So I think it's really interesting and important what you said about the process being holistic. And that's where the extracurriculars come in. And in the book, which is right here, there's a whole section on what we call talent. So talent is where you find your extracurricular, where we sort of talk about the extracurricular activities and discuss, how to develop those and how much do you need and what makes sense, right? And obviously for students who are starting out earlier, they have a lot more time to plan that, and they have a lot more time to kind of think about how to execute on it a little strategically. But for many sort of people who are in 12th grade right now, and I think I always hear students say, oh, I don't have any extracurriculars. I mean, you have, don't worry. So, it's something like, you can always find something, and that might be, it might be things that you're doing in school outside of the curriculum, whatever, cleanup drives or awareness campaigns or mentorship organizations in school and things like that. So I'm just saying that, students can really build those things wherever they're able. And I don't think that it's something that everyone has to get very stressed that, they haven't done they haven't won Olympiads, or they haven't, participated in a robotics team that's gone to the international, competition or something like that. I mean, those are real exceptions, and they do matter, but it isn't that if you do that necessarily, you will definitely get into a college. There's no guarantee on any parameter that if you tick that box, you will be admitted. So it just doesn't work that way. So as Kavita, I think, said earlier, and I think it's really important to emphasize that your extracurricular activities need to be very authentic, you know, and as you pursue them, make sure that they're intentional and authentic, and they're things that you want to do and the things that you have something to say about. Because choosing something just because somebody else did it, and then someone asks you a question about it, or you have to answer an essay question, it's not going to come across that it was genuine. Gosh, I feel like I have so many more things to say about extracurricular activities, but you know, I think all the sort of basic stuff that kids do at this age are all great, like Model United Nations, sports, music, you know, different art. I'm trying to think of what else. Social service. Sorry.
Drama.
Yeah, drama. All of those things count, and they're all things that kids should do if they enjoy them. And I think at this time, I just want to address this because it is a difficult time to, you know, to do something, because kids can't get out of their house much and engage in social service or internships or things like that. So, I mean, I think there are still opportunities that you can take to show that you have taken initiative in something that interests you. I think all that admissions offices want to know is, are you interested in something besides yourself and getting, you know, good grades and going to school? And so, like just yesterday, I saw a group of students who put on a charity concert on YouTube. So it was fun, and it was something, and they did something, and they cared about it, and they cared about the charity, they cared about the music. It was nice. So I think that, you know, there's always something to do if you care about something. It's when nothing interests you that's going to catch an admissions officer's attention. Like, this kid is not interested in anything. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd really, you know, I like I said, I could say a lot more about extracurricular activities, but they are important, and they're important to cultivate early, and they're important to kind of go deep into as much as you can.
I think your message is quality over quantity. I think it's so much better to have something you're really interested in, and something you can really dig deep in and really add to your community with that extracurricular, than having 30 things that you're sort of interested in and might do 1 hour a week, or 1 hour a year or something like that. So it's just to put it down on a list. So I think quality over quantity is a good message. And again, that message of authenticity that keeps coming up, and I'm so glad it is, because it really resonates when we read applications. Kim, I'm going to ask this next question to you, because we're getting a lot of follow-up questions to what Kavita said about applying from the Indian context. And students are asking things like, you know, my school doesn't offer different level of classes, and, you know, how do I ask my teachers to write recommendation letters when that's kind of not a typical practice in India? And so again, just like, how is it the student's responsibility to do all this if they're kind of in a local school? How do they best advocate for themselves in this process if it's not set up to help them that much?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we have worked with so many students like that. And again, the book has a whole section on, I think it's called How School Components. It's chapter 5, School Components, and it is something that I think would be really valuable for any student to actually sit down with you know, if the school is open-minded and the school wants to support them, sit down and go through that together, because that will really give you a very strong sense of, you know, what is the school's responsibility. And it's very important that it's executed well, because I think what you don't want to happen is a student is great, a student has done the hard work to, you know, to be competitive for a top university, and then the school just kind of doesn't send things on time, the teachers don't write recommendations properly, or the transcript isn't clear, or things like that, then, or the school profile doesn't exist. You know, so I think that it's very important that the school, you know, that the school is open to executing all those things. And I think it isn't that the school has to have a counselor, or that, you know, hundreds of kids from the school have to go abroad. That's not the issue. It just needs to be one authorized person at the school who will support the student, and you can get it done. it's really, it'll happen. And I just wanted to, by way of example, tell about the student we worked with who was in a, like a tier 2 city in India, and he was very, very bright and very competitive for any university anywhere in the world, actually. And he applied to all of them, and he didn't get admitted to any. And because for whatever reason, he heard about us, and he contacted me and Kavita, and I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, I remember now why were we even in that city. But yeah, so we met in person. We looked at his whole application. It was great. Everything looked pretty good. I mean, there were some things that we ended up changing, asking him to change in his essays and the additional information section. But there, his school had not submitted anything about what is the school, what is the, you know, it was that none of that was kind of submitted properly. And so we helped him work with his school to also submit that documentation the following year. And the following year he got in to, like, you know, several top Ivy League universities and other highly selective colleges with scholarships. And I think he's actually graduated from Princeton. Yeah. So, so, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, that it was only the school thing, but that is like that the school has to do their bit to sort of to support a student. It's very important. Yeah,
good.
sorry.
I want students to feel empowered, yes. And
yes,
I think that it is a lot of work though, and it is very different. And there will require some explanation to teachers about what a letter of recommendation is. And that is a little tough. So that is an extra hurdle, but also as admissions officers, we appreciate that you've gone through that work and that you've taken the time to really advocate for yourself.
Right. There are by the way, there are sample recommendations in the book.
Recommendation letters. So for kids who don't have, you know, a counselor at school or who have to go and advocate and figure this out, the book already offers, you know, a lot of the stuff that it's a jumping off point for the school in this process.
Yeah. Sorry, Nikki.
And I think this book is that's okay. No, this book is such a good resource not only for students but for teachers and counselors and parents who don't know much about this process. I mean, it's such a good resource for so many different groups of people who kind of want to learn more about this process. Kim, you said a magical word which we're getting lots of questions about, and that's scholarships. And so Kavita, could you kind of talk a little bit more about you know, the financial aid piece of all this, how students can best advocate for this or understand how funding at universities works, and scholarships, need-based, financial aid, anything to kind of talk a little bit more about funding university experience?
I'm actually going to defer because Kim is the expert on scholarships and financial
okay.
aid. So she can better answer it without sort of stepping on things. So that's okay.
Okay. I'm just answering this question. Actually, I'm just typing. Someone is asking, what is the book you're talking about? So the book is called Acing Admissions. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to share a slide that, yeah, Kavita's holding it up, that tells you where you can buy it. And anyway, that's just, sorry. So yes, scholarships. Oh, yeah.
Big topic. I know, it's a lot.
So, I mean, I think that what sometimes happens is students hear that, you know, so-and-so got, you know, a full scholarship to Harvard. So like, great, you know, that doesn't happen to everybody. It barely happens to anyone, actually. So what you have to keep in mind is that those are very, very rare experiences. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen to you, but it's a lot of hard work and a lot of determination goes into that. But I think that what we have in the US is we have a lot of colleges that are what is called need blind. Okay, let me back up a second. There are two kinds of financial aid in the US. There's there's financial aid need-based, and then there's merit scholarships, which is like, you know, you're just a great student and we want you to come, so we're going to offer you some money, right? So that's kind of a merit scholarship that can or cannot be connected to need, but you don't have to have financial need to get one of those scholarships. Those scholarships tend to be small, like $5,000, $10,000, something, you know, that is more important maybe in the name of it, because it's a named scholarship, like you're the the chancellor scholar or the dean scholarship or something like that. And you get, you know, like I said, we see, you know, maximum maybe $20,000 or something. Small numbers are like 5,000, and a lot of colleges in the US give these amounts and give these kinds of scholarships. So that's really important to understand that those are not based on financial need. So you could be a billionaire and still get that scholarship. If you're not a billionaire, you might want to look into need-based scholarships. So need-based scholarships are scholarships that are based on your financial need, and to demonstrate your need, you have to fill out some some paperwork, and which the CSS form and the other form I'm not remembering the name of right now.
FAFSA?
No, FAFSA is for U.S. citizens. Yeah, another
National
acronym.
Certificate or
Yeah,
something,
this is again all in the book. But the point is just that you have to fill out that. You have to demonstrate your financial need, and they'll ask for tax records and payroll statements and things like that. And then the college can estimate your family contribution. So they can say, this family seems able to pay $20,000 a year. Let's see if we can top up the rest for this student. But when it comes to topping up the rest, and this is where it gets technical, you have what are called need aware and need blind colleges. So if I'm a need aware college, I might say that, I really like this student, but they need so much money and I don't have it, so I'm not going to admit them. So my decision whether to admit them is I'm aware of how much money they need. Need blind means I'm not going to look at any financial need. I'm a need blind college. I want to support everybody who needs money, who I like the student, great. Turn the page, he needs money, let's give it to him. Doesn't need money, good for us, let's move on. So the whole process around admission is based they never look at the sort of financial need. So that's that's the difference, but those are kind of like many of the differences and nuances around financial aid. Again, there's a chapter in the book about it. But when a student has very, very high financial need and is extremely, capable, talented, and they're really what a university wants, whether that's a highly selective university or any university, then the university will usually fill that gap. However, they may not, and then the student may not be admitted. One thing I do want to say is that in the US, there are many colleges that are need blind for domestic students, US citizens, but very few that are need blind for international students. So there are only 5. There's Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT, and Amherst College, if Amherst is still need blind, I'm not sure. But those 5 colleges are really hard to get into. So if you're banking on getting a full scholarship from a need blind college, the ones that are need blind for international students are very, very selective. So that's another hurdle to clear. So it's very competitive to kind of achieve that. And I hope I've kind of said it all without saying too much, but that's the kind of, that's what I have to say about about scholarships.
It is so complicated, and you did give a really good introduction of what the different kind of categories are and how colleges look at it. So it's definitely a complicated process, and one that requires some understanding and some time to fully flesh out. So it is a lot, but there are scholarships available. Every college offers some kind of something. You just have to figure out if it's for you. And again, that goes back to fit, right? Financial piece of this should be a part of your fit. And so we've had some questions in the Q&A about, how do I find that best fit? And so it's just all these things we're talking about, and how they kind of come together as that fit piece. So again, that's just a big part of it. So thank you for your explanation. It is really tough to understand, but I think that it's still a part of that fit.
I think I would just want to say one thing that, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I don't want, a lot of times students who need financial aid but want to study in the US, they will have to compromise. And like I said, I don't want to use the word compromise in a negative way, but it's like, I need money and this college is giving it to me, and that works for me. But that may not have been your first choice college, but that's maybe where you end up. So, you have to be, when you need financial aid, you really have to be very open-minded.
And again, fit. I think that's a good, it's part of your fit for sure. Well, I think we should kind of wrap things up a little bit. And Kavita, if you could just offer, what is one piece of advice you would give to a high school senior and one piece of advice you would give to someone just starting out this process, maybe a 9th grader or 10th grader? And Kim, I'll ask you the same question, and then we can kind of talk about your book and where students can find that resource. But Kavita, if you could kind of just end us on one note to help students feel positive and encouraged about this process.
Absolutely. So I think for anyone who's in 12th grade, this is a dynamic, unusual year, and leverage that to your advantage. There's not a lot of, there's a lot of test optional for most universities, so leverage that. Figure out what you've done this, last few months of lockdown, wherever you are in the world, and expand on that and understand what you've learned about yourself in that process. Who else gets a gift of this much time at home with family and themselves? And it's not too late. I mean, this is the perfect time to start working on your applications for the US. But what I would say is do not dilly-dally from this point forward. Get really organized, buy the book, read the book, and pull out your Excel sheet or any sort of organizing tool and get going on the different pieces that you need in the application process. What's nice about the US process is that there's so many options that you really haven't missed out on anything, and you can just keep going on it right now, or even if you start in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months. For younger students, I think the biggest piece of advice that I always give everyone, every parent who asks me is, and it's not specific to college applications only, but I would say encourage your students, encourage yourself to read as much as possible. Read. Because the way you become a better writer is by understanding different genres, different styles of writing, different types of authors, different perspectives, etc. So make it a point to read things that you're interested in, read fiction, nonfiction, etc. And whatever is age appropriate. You don't need to go nuts and try to read something that's way above your sort of age level or grade level. But those are the kind of things that will help you when you have to write lots and lots and lots of essays. It sort of seeps into your consciousness and you don't really realize it, but it gives you the tools that you need to write better. So those are the two pieces of advice I would give to older students and younger students.
And Kim, I'll ask you the same question. Then I think we're also getting some kind of questions about the book and just what's in the book. And I know you talked a little bit, but if you could kind of tell students about the book and follow that up.
So I just wanted to say one thing I want to say, because I just did see this on the questions, was with the scholarships are typically institutional scholarships. So you apply for the scholarships at the same time as you apply for the university. So there's no separate scholarships that you apply for typically. That's just one point I wanted to make. I do want to talk about the book, and I've put the slide up here of where you can buy it. It's the book is really a very, what we feel is a very practical guide to, the steps, and we really broke it down into, what are the, how do you choose a college? What are the different components of the application? Like we've kind of alluded to in this discussion, there's the talent, the data, and the voice components. So talent is extracurriculars, data are your grades and test scores, and voice are your essays. We've talked about all of those in this discussion. So we go through each of those pieces. And then, so those are the components. And then we have a full chapter on how to apply, like literally, how do you apply to college? What do you do first? What do you do second, third? And what are the different steps you have to take? And then there's, of course, the section on what the school needs to do. And then there's a section on financial aid. So the book covers all of this. Kavita, am I forgetting anything? And there are a lot of samples in the books of these different documents that you will need to understand and fill out. And when I say how to apply, I mean things like, what is the Common App? How do you make an account? Things that are all the way from very basic to things that are a little more subjective, like what do you write your essay on, or how do you choose a college? And I think, when the section on how to choose a college tries to break down U.S. colleges into different categories, which, as you know, Nikki, sometimes they all defy those categories. Like Wake Forest is a great liberal arts university, but also a very great research university. So you can't make that distinction very well either. So, it's just kind of going through what are those differences and how can they sometimes be used to make decisions, otherwise not. But yeah, I mean, I think the book really does try to break it down for every student. And I'll be very honest with you. A lot of people have asked me, Kavita, you know, why did you write this book? Don't you want people to come, you know, to you and ask you these questions and, you know, use your consultancy? And our answer is always, you know, no, I don't want everyone to come and ask me questions. That would be too many people. But no, actually what I mean is that, you know, everyone doesn't need a full service counselor. Some people just need their basic questions answered. And we've run into multiple students who've seen us either, you know, around the various events or whatever, and said, oh my God, I read your book and I used it to apply to college and I got into my dream school. So, you know, kids use this book only. It is possible to use this book only and to get into college with scholarships and, you know, and succeed in the application process. And, you know, that's what we want. That's why we wrote the book, just so that we are, you know, the information and the experience that we've sort of gathered over the years is available, you know, to help people. That's really, yeah. So.
I don't know if you mentioned this, Kim. The one thing, this is the second edition of the book. The first edition came out 5 years ago, and we've updated based on, you know, trends and what have you. But there's also a lot of case studies in the book. So, yes, you know, it gives people real specific sense of an applicant and what their background was and where they ended up enrolling in university. So that often helps contextualize for parents and students where they might fit in this process.
Okay, and I read the book. It's such a good guide. I feel like I learned a little bit more about this college admissions process, and I'm in the thick of it all the time. So it's written in a very approachable style that gets to the details, but also gets to kind of a broader picture of U.S. admissions, and it's so helpful for students for whom this is a very foreign territory. And so it's a great book for students and parents, but also, you know, counselors and people who are assisting students in this realm. So I think we have had a great panel today, and I hope that you've had a better understanding of this process and have learned a little bit more about how colleges read applications, especially applicants from India, but from all around the world. And I just want to thank Kavita and Kim for their work in this area for the second edition of their book, but also for taking their time to discuss this today. And thank you all for joining us. And hopefully this has given you some encouragement to understand this process a little bit better. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. I just wanted to say, you know, really give you a huge thanks for moderating this for us. It's been really wonderful, and you've always been such a big fan. So we really appreciate that. And I wanted to also say that, you know, there are lots of questions we did not get to answer. And I know that's always disappointing. It's disappointing to us, but we tried our best. But if anyone, you know, has anything that they'd like to ask me personally, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn, and Kavita probably the same. So, you know, we're available, or you can contact me through these Red Pen handles. And I'm just thinking, Kavita, I don't think your handles are here, but you can connect with Kavita on LinkedIn. Yeah. And if you have questions about Wake Forest, which I did see quite a lot of questions about Wake Forest, please contact Nikki. I think your you know, details should be on the Wake Forest admissions website, correct?
It is easy to find, yes.
All right, okay. Thank you so much, and everyone have a great weekend, what's left of it.
Bye-bye, thanks.
Bye, bye.